All right, we're recording. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode Who Knows Revenue Show. In this episode, we're basically going to piggyback off of Sunday's newsletter and talk about what we would tell ourselves, if we could hop in a time machine and go back and talk to ourselves in the first couple of years. Sunday, I put out the newsletter, 7 things I'd tell myself as a new producer, and got a lot of great feedback. So I just kind of wanted to do that little exercise and hear what you would tell young Micah. So let's start off. The first one I put on was you don't need a fancy outbound sequence. Basically meaning just pick cold calling, direct mail, email, whatever. Just pick one and master it. You don't need to do all of it. You definitely don't need to have some, cool sequence that you use using this. Just pick one of them, get really good at it, and just stick to one thing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think the only difference, I think in the newsletter you'd put like whether it be email, this, that, pick one. I think if we're being honest and you're really trying to go after mid-market business, I mean, email isn't going to get you there. LinkedIn isn't going to get you there. I think networking's not going to get you there in the time you want to get there. I think cold calling or door knocking are the only two methods that you're going to have to get really comfortable with really quick if you want to produce mid-market business at a pace you need to in order to keep your job. So get good at it is what I would say. And sprinkling the other stuff, I'm just saying get really good at it. And you only do that by practice and reps and role play, whatever. But so
No, I agree. I agree. I just, you know, was trying to be inclusive. That's all the rage these days. But yeah,
no,
I
no,
mean,
I get
the
it.
first couple
I
of years, it's drop ins and cold calls. That's gotta be it.
Yeah, that made me just think of something kind of off subject, but kind of related. I was on LinkedIn yesterday. I saw Ryan Hanley's post a day or so before that popped up in my feed, and it was about all these agents trying to be LinkedIn influencers.
I didn't
Essentially,
read
it's
it.
yeah, it was decent. It was good. I agreed with most of it. The only part that I would say is that's not really the problem because he was kind of saying, "Hey, your post that gets 3 likes, but it's about something plumbers could find value in is more valuable than the post that gets 30 that a bunch of agents like, right?" And
Mm-hmm.
so I agree with that premise. And 99% of my material has always been geared towards my buyers, but I do think there's room in there for your personality and to have fun and entertain and all that stuff too. But I think 80% could be towards that. But the point of me saying this is that what he missed in that post that I would add is that that's not really. I don't care if someone wants to be a LinkedIn influencer or not. The problem is thinking that LinkedIn is going to get you to your numbers. And the
Mm.
premise of his post was almost like, hey, if you do videos about plumbing, blah blah blah. And I'm not saying he said that's the you can do this exclusively and get there, but it was kind of written in that way, like, hey, do it this way. But I think the problem is if your goal is to write 100K, you should earmark zero of that budget attributed to LinkedIn. That should be, don't plan if you get it, it's a nice surprise, but don't plan on any revenue coming from LinkedIn. And we talked about this in other episodes. There's exceptions and stuff like that. There's people that have some the rare ability to do that, but majority speaking, majority
Just leave it
speaking,
at
yeah,
that. Cough,
and
cough, Instagram model. Huh?
yeah, and I've done this for a long time, and my posts can always get better, but I get pretty good traction. And again, 99% is geared towards buyers, and I would say directly like cold inbound DMs that have led to revenue. Again, it's been like 50K total, right? So it's like, I've had other people send me messages or I keep in touch maybe, so I could maybe kind of loosely attribute it to it. But anyways, not to go off on a rant, I just think it's important as social media becomes more talked about, more popular, again, just to stick to the basics. So if you're listening to this, that's what I would tell my younger self is don't get off track and have fun. Go on LinkedIn, go to networking events, go to golf events, but you got to keep first things first. And so that's ultimately what I would say is get really good at the phones or really good at door knocking, one of the two or both. and know what pays the bills, right? And
Yeah, I would say pick one. I guess that's my
yeah.
point. It's just to pick one. You don't have to do both. All right.
Oh,
So
100%. Yep.
what all right, let's go to you. What would you tell yourself?
I would say it takes more numbers than you think than you think it will, right? So if you think it's going to be
Yep.
30 calls, it's going to be 60. If you think it's going to be 10 proposals, it's got to be 20. If you think it's going to be, you know, you get the gist. If you need 300 prospects, put 600 or always be adding to it.
Yep.
And it sounds, again, every time I talk like this, I know I feel like I'm like a 50-year-old, man talking, and they're like, oh, look at this old slimy sales trader, just talks about numbers. He's so out of touch. I've just been doing this too long. I've seen too many young people fail. I've seen some succeed, and the ones that I see succeed, uh, they know it's kind of a numbers game. They stick to the basics, and so yeah, do more than you think. Perfect example. There was a guy in our school community. This was probably like first week one of that. He had put something like, I was making 80 calls a day year one, blah blah blah. Like, and I thought that was pretty cool because it was like, to me, it was like, hey, whatever it takes. His message was like, hey, year one I had to make 85, year two I was still making 60. And he's like, I validated in year three or whatever. And my whole message I got from that is like, whatever it takes. Like, how many calls should I make? However many it takes to get the conversations that you need to have. That's what ultimately matters. Like, oh, I made 40 check marks. I made 40 calls. I'm good. Well, dude, there's 5 hours left in the day. Like, your job is to produce. If you do have no conversations, get out there to have more conversation. Like, keep calling until you get a conversation. Do something
Yeah.
different. Research some new prospects.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to parlay that into another thing. We'll call this number three. It's kind of like, you have to know your prospecting numbers. And so that kind of ties in with however many it takes. Track your prospecting numbers so that over a long enough time horizon, you can start to get an idea and see a trend. It takes me this many calls to get this many conversations. It takes this many conversations to get this many presentations to close BORs. That way, once you do that, uh, it's going to be pretty. It's it's going to be pretty standard unless some part of your process changes. So then you can just reverse engineer into the numbers, right? It's kind of like a faucet you turn on and off. If let's say you want to write more, you just crank that volume up. You want to write less, you can crank it down. But as long as you're using a big enough sample size, it's usually about right. And it's funny, you and I will talk, or let's say we'll get like another guy will come in and be like, oh man, I made so many calls today and I only got X amount of conversations. And we look at it and it's like, yep, 1 in 10, 1 in 12, that's about right. Because whether it's
Mm-hmm.
us or them or whatever, the numbers, unless you're calling in saying I've got a product, the numbers are what they are, really. So just
Yeah.
take your average account size and take the amount that you want to write and then reverse engineer into your activity. I just
Well,
really
and
kind of shot from the hip. And I knew to do that when I first started. But I saw everybody else in the office. They just, kind of going to lunch with this guy, and we're kind of like over here like bullshitting around the water cooler, and you kind of get sucked into following the pace of everybody else. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
There was zero Micahs in my office that were like door closed, banging calls. It was very much, it was more like just kind of like a country club, man. We're just coming in and out, we're kind of going and mixing it up. And, I don't know, man. You guys want to go grab an early drink, or, it's like, let's go
Yeah.
hit some balls, you know?
Yeah. 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 No, I got you. And if you haven't, that kind of transitions into another side note here, but on the Diary of a New Producer series last week, this is like, case in point of why you keep track of your numbers. So Ian and I chatted, it was basically a month, looking at 5 months in the data, and he's frustrated with his results and like, man, why am I not where I want to be? Not saying from a revenue, but just not more opportunities, right? There should have been a little bit more opportunities coming up. And when we look at the numbers, I said, hey, let's go back. We added up all his numbers from week, because I had him do that. So he actually did keep track of that. And like you said, the numbers were 1 in 12 or 11 calls, conversation. It was like 1 in 7 conversations to meeting. So it was very much in line. And especially your first 6 months when you're doing this, guys, is your numbers actually, your conversation to meeting rate's going to be a little bit off because you don't have all those follow-up later calls coming back that will help bring that more to like a 1 in, I think closer to like a 1 in 5, 1 in 6. He was probably at like 1 in 7 to 1 in 8. Can't remember. But anyway, so we go through all this stuff, and then I said, you know what? And then I took the numbers that I just told him to do. Literally, I plugged them in, and I said, hey man, if you would have, now I said if you'd have made 200 calls a week, 50 calls a day, or 40 calls a day, you would have been at 4,500 calls. You're at, it was like 25. It was basically like 1,800 calls more. You would have doubled your meetings. You would have maybe doubled or 3x your sales. And then instead of being sitting at 10 revenue after 5 months, maybe you're at 30, you know? So it was just a really eye-opening thing, but we would have never been able to do that exercise if he hadn't kept track of his actual numbers. And so, you know, it was an important lesson for me too, being like the manager mentor role. Like, probably don't let it go 5.5 months before you know, because I'm not as really as manager. So it's like, I should probably have been a little bit more like, hey, I think maybe 3 is kind of a good check-in, you know, or even 2 months, in terms of the numbers, because he sends me them every week. But, you know, so some week I'd see 165, then some weeks might be 110, but then maybe 1 week was 200, right? So but you add all that together, and he's averaging, it was like 115 a week. You know, he should have been at 200. That's a big gap. That's almost only 50% of what I told you to be. You know, it's like, you miss it 1 week, it doesn't seem that big, but you start to go over 23 weeks and we add it all up, and it's 1,800 calls and 13 meetings later, and it's a big deal in the mid-market space when all you need is a couple wins to get you across the line. And so, just eye-opening exercise.
It's true. All right, passing it to you. What's next on the list?
Man, I was talking to a guy about this the other day. We were trying to recruit, looking at leaving Federated, and a direct writer, and come in here and ask me what I would do. And I think one thing that hung me up the first couple of months, I think slowed me a little bit, is I tried, the agency was like, hey, we need producers. We should get some producers in oil and gas. We used to write a ton of it. Now we don't really do it much anymore. And I didn't know.
You're saying when you went from Federated to Marsh.
Correct. Yep. When I was a first year agent. And so I was like, okay. So I was trying to learn this stuff, dabble in it, like make calls to these people. And I'm talking like downstream, like oil drillers, like, you know, so it's a different product. And I knew it decent, but it's just like, you don't have that confidence. And then eventually, like, you know what, a couple months in, I was like, I just got to stick to what I know works well. Our agency does construction well. I know contractors well from my time at Federated. And then when I got honed in on just contractors and like keeping it simple, I guess I'm kind of blending two different things. Honing in on contractors is one. Second thing is just keeping it simple. We've talked about this with my phone script, but it's like, just be straight to the point, man. Like, hey, I'm an agent. I know you got somebody. Would you ever be open to a conversation about your insurance? That's all I was calling to see. You know, if not, that's cool. That's literally like, people are like, that's your script? I'm like, dude, you're calling about a product everybody has. Half the people you call love their agent. Like, just keep it simple. If you struggle to say some fancy script, right? So those are two things right there. Is focus on an industry that your agency's good at and that you're comfortable with, and then keep it simple.
Yeah, think of it. I like to think of it as like a pickup line. You know what I mean? So when you think that you have to call in and like have some fancy script, or like what a lot of people will tell me is they're like, oh, we just need to have like a bold statement to really get their attention. And I'm like, okay, so let's reverse this. Let's say you were going to pick up a girl, you know, or whatever. Let's say a pickup line. If you have some fancy douchebag pickup line, they're like, what is this guy? You know, but like if you just go up to somebody and be like, oh, hey, wow, you're pretty. You ever had, you know, you want to go grab a drink or whatever, something like that.
Sure.
Obviously, you can tell I've been out of the game for a while. Jesus Christ, that was terrible. But you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Being direct and to the point, and they're either interested or they're not. But like, you're that Guido with the slick back hair and the, you know, the like the affliction shirt and the ripped jeans at the, you know, what was that, Jersey Shore, going up like you're the situation trying to go up and drop some pickup line with some fancy script. That's how I That's what it looks like to me. So, anyways,
And there is some people I think that are really good at saying longer scripts, right? I'm just not.
true.
Maybe you're not, but you know what? Speaking of a script, one thing I always liked, and keeping it super simple that worked was call the guy, be like, yeah, this is John. I'm like, John, hey man, I was just driving down the road here in Houston, saw your truck on the road, and wanted to give you a call. I work with a ton of plumbers. And I know you got an agent, but would you ever be open to chatting sometime? Adding that little reference point of how you found them sometimes actually, I don't know if people were like, oh, that's cool. You saw my truck. Oh, what'd you think? You know, or be like, hey man, and then you start talking like, yeah, I really like your logo. It's pretty cool. You know, but that was always a good
Yeah, I saw
little.
your driver texting on the interstate. you you need some help with risk management.
Yeah, yeah. I'm reporting you to the reporting you to your insurance company. But by the way, if you want to talk, you know, let me know.
Dude, I used to work with this absolute bear of a lady at my old office. I mean, just an absolutely awful person. And that was like her MO. This is a side story. She would, she would, wherever she was driving, if she saw a commercial vehicle and somebody texting at a stoplight, driving, whatever, like she would call the company and tell them and give them the license plate. And she even called like the local sheriff's office on
What?
multiple cops or sheriffs tattling on sheriffs that they were on their phone while they were in the vehicle. Yeah. So, anyways,
Uh,
um, random, irrelevant tangent.
Her name
Okay.
wasn't Karen by any chance, was it?
No, no, but God, that this lady was a. Anyways, all right. So one that I should have put in there that I didn't, and like how I didn't think of this is beyond me, but it's honestly, besides like knowing your prospecting numbers and needing more at bats, it's follow up like a freaking madman.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes,
and that's one thing, man, I was not great at that. I'm still not great at,
dude.
um, like setting tasks, setting reminders, being diligent, using your CRM, and not obviously not pestering the shit out of people, but like, I can't tell you how many deals I lost because I would call them, they would not be interested, or maybe I just, I got to the finish line and I didn't win. And then so my thing was always like go and find new. And then I would call them back like I was like, oh, you know what? Like 2 years later, I should call Jeff and see how he's doing. Oh, we just moved to McGriff. I'm like, oh Jesus Christ.
Yep.
But
Yeah,
it's like I thought I don't know, for some reason it was always I thought I just treated no as like no was forever and no's never forever. But that
yep.
also the other side of that coin is and we see this a lot with guys that we talk to, they just over follow up and too frequently because they think like, oh, if I can just get him on the phone again and say this one thing, I can change his mind because I can really help him. But it's really just a systemic problem that's rooted in the fact that they don't have enough prospects in the hopper. So they're like over pursuing the handful that they do have that actually
Hmm.
showed a little bit of interest. And so they're like calling them monthly or emailing them weekly or whatever. It's like, so anyways, follow up like crazy, but don't be a stalker.
So to add to your, I 100% agree with you. Um, and it will really pay off in year two. I think year one, you won't see the fruits of all your follow up, you know, or maybe you'll see maybe the 8, 9, 10 month mark, you'll start to see some of that. But really in year two is when you'll see if you stay organized and follow up. And that's just why we talk about the follow up later list and why I'm such a believer in having a printed out list in front of you of people that say, hey, call me back, or that you have a conversation with. I would say that if you've never spoke with someone, follow up with them, but I wouldn't follow like overkill on the follow up, kind of like what you just said, Trey. I mean, I always thought these statistics from the company that now sold, but used to be Phone Ready Leads, that tracked thousands, tens of thousands of calls, and said if someone doesn't pick up the phone within the first 5 attempts, chances are they're never going to pick up their phone. So ever since I heard that, it really changed the way I looked at this, and this was just 2 years ago. So it kind of changed the way I followed up, and and really hit them heavy. You know, I know a lot of times you see statistics like most sales are made in the 18th follow up. Well, I think It doesn't mean 18 attempts in 1 month or 2 months. It's like uh, that might be over a 3-year span, guys. So it's like, you know, I think that's important to realize. But the follow up later list, the whole point of that is like, yeah, we got to produce now. So take the people who you do talk to, who you think are hotter and actually open, and have you maybe have a 2 minute conversation, but timing just seemed off. Those are the ones that I would extremely keep in front of my face, put in my CRM, make sure they do not fall the cracks. Send them a card after you talk to them. Stay in touch in the 3 months in between now and the next conversation when they said to call you back. Those are the people that I would stay on their tail, right?
I also think it's super important to talk about like the different types of follow up. There's like, so I've been thinking about this a lot. I might do a newsletter on this. There's like 3 buckets of follow up. There's like, and I think it kind of gets all convoluted and mixed together. So we need to parse it out a little bit. So you have follow up that's pre contact made. Okay, so it's like you said, 4 to 5 attempts to get them on the phone, right? So that's a follow up. It's like following up to get that first conversation. And then you have, okay, post contact, which is call me back later or I'm interested. And those are 2 different buckets, and how you follow up and the sequencing on that is different. So somebody like for you, your follow up later list, that's for those people that are like, call me back later. They have some type of interest, but they can't talk about it right now. Those are the guys that you're going to be a little bit more persistent with. Maybe they tell you to call them back in 60 days or 30 days or whatever. You want to hit that, and it's okay to hit them 4 or 5 times, 6 times, because they're business owners. They're busy. It takes time for them to get back to you. They're not ghosting you. Insurance is almost never a priority. And then the other part of the post contact is like, I'm not interested. That's that, 18 touch deal, right? So you got to think about it as 3 different buckets, and the follow up is different in all three.
Well, and you make a good point there on the people who in the middle bucket who said, yeah, call me back in 60 days. And then when you call them back and they don't pick up, don't think they're ghosting you, because those are the people I will literally harass and call 18 times in a month, like every
Yeah,
other day. Because
yeah.
guess what? They gave me their word, and I'm going to hit them extremely hard for about a solid 3 week, 4 week span, and then I'm not gonna keep that level of persistence up, but I'm gonna then space it out more, and still gonna keep hitting them up once, twice a month, because I know they picked up their phone. I know they showed some type of interest, and maybe some of you listening, like, oh, you're just wasting your time. You got to, cut bait or whatever. But I don't know. I still think, hey, I want to hear that out. I want to see that thing through. And a lot of times I'll say in my messaging to these people, it's like, hey, after like 5, 6 attempts after the first initial contact, and they've kind of ghosted me. But just a quick story on that, real quick. There's a deal. If I don't get it this year, I'm 100% sure I'm getting it next year. Just timing. But I called this lady in December or late November. She said, yeah, I'd be open. Let's talk in January. And I knew they were a mid-March expiration date, which I was like, that's not really what I want to do, but you're not going to cram it down someone's throat, right? So call her first week of January. Dude, I had like 6, 7 attempts in there in my CRM, nothing. And so I was driving past her office, stopped, left my book, and then I get a random call back like a week later. And she's like, hey, this is so-and-so. I got your book. I grabbed it on the way out the door. I read it last night. And is it too late to talk, or, and anyways, and now, so I'm kind of working on the deal potentially. I don't know what's going to happen, but more of the story is I called her probably 7, 8 times over, and emailed and left messages over, a 3 week span. So
Yeah, I hear you. I think a lot of people hear the follow up thing and they take what you just talked about and they apply it to the pre-contact or the
yeah,
post-contact not interested. And it's like, no, you don't. You always talk about like the prospect sitting on the fence and you don't care what side they fall on. You just want to knock them off the damn fence. It's like
yep.
they've already chosen what side of the fence they're on for this year. Like you don't need to follow up with that guy 18 times. Like follow up with him, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, whatever. Call him after a renewal. But like it's that it kind of all gets mixed together, and that is one of the biggest questions that we've gotten lately is like, what kind of sequencing? What does the follow up look like? How many times should I follow up? And so I don't know. Hope this clarifies it a little bit. All right, what else you got?
um Trying to think if there's anything else that we haven't really covered. I mean, there's other, I mean, there's so many things you could say to someone, but
Sure.
I know one of your things is the whole, work on an AOR basis only.
Why you say that's a me thing? That's been an
No,
us
no, no,
thing. You're the one that pivoted.
no. I'm saying AOR. Like, if you had a new producer, you're pretty hell bent on being like, I would force him to go AOR only. Like right out the gates, unless there's an exception, right? There's
Or yeah, I mean, if you're just gonna, I don't know, man. Maybe I should.
Well, we don't need to
It
beat that
just
horse again. It just I'm just thinking
depends
like
on the situation. I just think it was insanely invaluable that they made you do that because I've seen how that's worked out for you, and then I didn't have that structure, and I just chased all kinds of dead ends. You know what I mean? Because I couldn't
so
pre-qualify somebody.
so here's what I would say to my younger self is target deals, prospects in your mind that you think will be, if your floor is 10, target people at 20. Because you're going to fall into, what happens is inevitably you think people are 20 and they're 8, 9, 10. And so you just raise your whole bar, right? But if you go in, if you say my floor is 10, I'm going to go at people I think are 10, you're going to end up getting a lot of 4s, 5s, 6s and working and bogged down on smaller deals and have people in your pipeline. Maybe you're calling them 3 years, you finally get through and they're 6 in revenue. You're like, man. And, if you're listening and that's a good account for you, I'm not trying to, belittle that. I'm just saying whatever, if whatever your goal is, just I'd say go over, shoot for accounts that are a little bit bigger than that. And then you will naturally bring up your average size account, right? Um,
Yep.
so that's one thing that I think is important, especially when you're building out a prospect list, because that's when you're doing it, especially year one, you're kind of building that foundation of a prospect list. So shoot a little bigger. And then on that point, also always prospect, right? Always be adding to that list every single day. That's critical because you're like, I get some people like, hey, I got my 100. I'm just gonna call these people, and then I'm gonna filter in new ones. No, like there's so much time in a day. Like all add to it. Like I don't know, just always be adding to the list. A couple a day as you're driving around town, as you're whatever
Yeah.
out on LinkedIn. So
That was one thing that I did is I kept a notebook right next to me. And as I drove around and saw vehicles or saw businesses or whatever, I'd write it down.
yep.
The other big thing that I was going to say, which is also funny that I didn't include this because this really screwed me, is don't split revenue in perpetuity.
Some people
When
disagree
I
with you
got,
on that. That kind of
huh?
that's a polarizing statement to some, I'm sure.
Yeah. So the way it worked with me was it's like, okay, you're a new producer, and we quote unquote had mentors, and you would open the door, and then the mentor would come with you and close it. Supposedly, my mentor didn't close a lot, but uh, what would happen is, but then it would be an in perpetuity thing, right? Then we just split commission. Well, Marsh, and again, I'm not putting blame anywhere else other than on my shoulders. It was me. I made the decision to do it. I chose to do that. It's nobody else's fault but mine. But I looked up at the end of 3 years and I had less than 200 on the books. Now I had brought in damn near twice that much
Or
revenue.
yeah.
Yeah, but I split all but 2 accounts, with somebody else. And man, that really hurt. I could have used that 385K or whatever it was, but I didn't, because I was splitting in perpetuity. Then I tried to go back and say, hey, can we work out a deal where this can just be mine? And that went over like a turd in a punch bowl, so it
Plus, I think you learn
find a
more.
mentor who's not a revenue greedy guy. If you're going to do the
Yep.
mentor thing, find somebody that is like, they don't need the revenue, they just genuinely want to help, and so
Y-
like they'll come in, there's some type of scaling thing where it's 50-50 year one, and then year two 25, and then year three it's all yours. You know what I mean? There's just find somebody who's willing to work with you on that if you can, because splitting forever sucks.
Yeah, I mean that does suck. That's why I never did it. And I
And
tell
you
young
told me
people
not
that.
to do it.
Yeah, I tell young people or anyone I talk to, is like, don't split, man. Try to work the deal yourself. Like, find someone. Usually, there's someone in your office who will help. If you bring the deal back and just say, I don't want you to dissect this whole thing. I just want, can you just give me some direction? There's someone in your office, I guarantee, who will just help, or someone you met on LinkedIn or whatever. Um, But one thing I was going to add to that
Join Max
is,
Revenue HQ, our community where we'll help you.
oh yeah, shameless plug. I like it. Over 400 members. That's
400
awesome.
producers from around the country in there, all mixing it up, and anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is that you probably cost yourself some learning experiences because you were good at producing and out there door knocking and having conversations, and you got this guy you were co-producing with, and he was the technical guy, right? And so you never basically, if you'd have just cut your teeth on those first three, four, and it would have been painful, maybe you lose one you would have got. It would have actually kind of, I think it would have, catapulted you because it would have instilled you with confidence. You'd have had to learn how these deals work from soup to nuts, marketing, what apps need to be, what questions are kind of asked, and it would have been painful. But I think if you'd have done that yourself, you'd have learned a lot more, and then it would
Bro,
have
I
set up
didn't
your
fill
career.
out an app until my third year.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding.
Well, dude,
That cost me so much technical ability.
this is,
I am still deficient. I know auto,
yeah.
right? But like if somebody came to me with a property schedule, like yeah, I mean I could do it now, but like I don't know it like I should know it. I don't
Dude,
know I don't know a lot of things that I should know. You know what I mean?
yeah. And people talk about how can I learn more? How can I'm telling you, completing applications and um, spending time with a prospect and just like asking them all the questions, you do that two, three times, that will start to stick in your brain. And there's no better way to learn. But then what happens is you start to know the questions that you need to have asked anyways, and they just work their way into a conversation, or you drop some knowledge on a excavating contractor where you ask them a question about their equipment in your course of conversation because you know that underwriters ask that, and it kind of now you're bringing value to conversations too because you're asking questions that are a little bit more in depth. I'm not saying you got to be a technical wizard, um, but one thing that was interesting, a deal I'm working right now, we can't AOR half of it, so just a weird funky situation. But anyways, I went through. They complained that their agent doesn't talk to them, really hasn't in 25 years, just kind of sends in the renewal. And we went through some applications for around an hour, and I was just firing all these questions, and we have, it led to all the other conversations. He's like, these are things I've never thought about before, and this is awesome. So it's a really good way to demonstrate value. And it doesn't mean you have to work on a quoting basis. You can get the AOR and then go fill out the application with that person that had just hired you as their agent. That's where you invest the time. So you can still learn that way without quoting and just being a quote machine.
Yeah. Yep. All right. I think we circled the wagons pretty good. You got anything else
Yeah.
that you want to add?
No, I don't. I think we're pretty set at this point. If you're a younger producer, keep it simple. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Stick to the basics. KISS. I think, and
It
and
gets
go
easier.
watch an episode of Diary of a New Producer from last week because it's kind of eye opening, and you don't want to find
Yeah, I
yourself
thought
in
that
that
was great,
position.
by the way. That was great. That was dead on.
Sure.
It
So
gets easier, you know, and I can remember sitting in rooms, sitting in a sales room and they're talking about all this stuff and it sounded like Chinese to me because I didn't come from this industry. And I was like, not only do I have to sell, I got to get indoors. I have to know what I'm talking about to get in the doors. I've got to know all this coverage. I've got to know what a EMOD is, like this is like it would be like dropping me off. It was literally like you dropped me off in China and you gave me something and you told me to sell it. And I didn't know how to speak the language. I didn't know what any of it meant. And all I knew is that I could open doors.
yeah,
And I was like, man, when is it ever going to make sense? And if you just keep doing it and, you know, don't do what I did, don't try to shirk the technical piece just because you can open up doors because it might be a shortcut in the time and early on, but it ended up biting me in the ass because I ended up splitting revenue, which cost me, and I missed out on all the valuable learning that goes with eating that shit, filling out the apps, asking the questions, having somebody to come over and be like, what does this mean? Like I would look at an app and I would just like, I'm not doing this. And so don't do that. Don't
Yep.
be me. Oh my God, there's a semi driving down my street. What the hell?
I thought he was coming
Uh,
right at you. Thought that was gonna be the final episode of Max right
see
there.
you out. God, it's been good.
So how that thing would probably go viral.
I know.
Podcaster
Max Revenue
by
killed.
semi.
Max Revenue killed in extreme car crash. But anyways,
They dig a little
I'm actually
deeper.
on my way to go.
I was just gonna say they dig a
Is
little
it,
deeper. They find out the driver was like Randy Schwartz or something.
and he was texting on his phone.
Yeah, a competitor. I say that in quotes because we don't. It's not a competitor, but that would just be
Yeah.
too funny.
I'm actually, one of the cool things that's happened with Max Revenue is like it spins off, all these different opportunities or, relationships and conversations. I'm actually going to lunch right now with this guy who works for, or not lunch. I'm about to go meet breakfast in 15 minutes. I got to hurry. Go and eat breakfast with this guy that works for one of these firms that does like agency valuations and helps them sell.
Oh
And so
yeah.
he's like, "Hey, I'm in town for whatever. Let's go grab a coffee." So I was like, even though it has nothing to do with what I'm doing, it's still uh it's cool because one of the side products or whatever of this whole thing is like just getting to meet a bunch of cool people adjacent or in the industry or whatever. And so it's been cool to talk with all these people. So anyways, give them hell
Well,
today. Do your thing and I'll be in touch.
later.
All right, everybody, have a good one.